afternoon, honourable members. Please remain standing while we listen to God Save the Queen.
God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
Honourable members, please be seated.
Introduction of visitors. Introduction of guests. Ministerial statements.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We can often become distracted from the real reason that brings, I believe, all of us to this place, regardless of political stripe, and that is service to the public, service to this province. It is this service that leads all of us here in one way or another to a calling to help make life better for Albertans. No one embodied this call to service more than Manmeet Singh Bhular. He was always driven to help others. Born in Calgary on March the 1st of 1980, Manmeet, or Mita as he was known to his friends, would commit himself to building his community very early on. In 2008, he became the then youngest MLA to be elected to Alberta's 27th legislature, but his election would be a symbol for so many, as he prominently rose through the ranks of the Progressive Conservative Caucus before on October the 12th of 2011, becoming the first turbaned Sikh appointed to a cabinet in Canada. While he served in several portfolios, including Service Alberta and Infrastructure, it is his work as Minister of Human Services that stands out for so many. Manmeet came to this challenging role with his heart wide open, as it always was, ready to do the hard work necessary to bring more transparency and accountability to the reporting of the fatalities of children in government care. Most notably, he introduced in this chamber what would be turned into be abolished the publication ban that prevented families from speaking out when their child passed away while in the care of the government. At the time he said, and I quote, "I believe we must empower those who are closest to these children to speak or not to speak. It is their right as human beings. If we do not have the right to speak up about justice as individuals, then we have taken away too much," unquote. Madam Speaker, many will remember the news conference where Manmeet announced this transformational change in government policy and how his voice broke when he spoke. That's just who he was. Compassion and empathy coursed through his veins. Driven by the deep desire to leave this province as a better place than he found it, Manmeet's every action embodied the essence of his Sikh faith, especially the principle of seva, or selfless service to others. Madam Speaker, that hard work and passion would prove to be an inspiration for so many, especially in his own community. Today, across party lines and legislatures throughout Canada, we see elected Canadians proudly wearing a turban, such as the member for Calgary-Falconbridge, and filling critical roles in public service. But it was not just his notable place in history that made Manmeet special to so many. It was just him, his larger-than-life personality, his kindness, his laugh that could light up a room, his passion for service, his ability to make friends and strangers alike laugh and feel welcome. People who sat in this place with Manmeet can share countless stories about his kindness, as we've heard in recent speeches on a bill that will be voted on shortly. And it's often global outreach. In fact, I will never forget the last time I was with Mita was at one of the Gurdwaras here in Edmonton in early October of 2015. And we were there to discuss his proposal for Canada to create a special refugee resettlement program for Sikhs in Afghanistan who are facing violent persecution. I was meeting with him in my capacity as Minister of National Defense, and in part based on his input, made a commitment that if re-elected, the government which I serve would create such a program. And I know that was one of, not only for Menmeet, but his father and family, a point of great emphasis and priority, which was to offer Canada's protection and freedom to Sikhs who were being persecuted for their faith. The MLA for Calgary Hayes shared some of these stories, remembering Menmeet in this place on November 25th, 2015. That was just 2 days after Meeta was killed, in a final act of service, stopping to help someone on the QE2 highway, something he didn't need to do, and countless others undoubtedly drove by and avoided doing. But not Menmeet Bholar. He stopped to offer help to someone who was in need, demonstrating through such an ordinary act of kindness the man that he truly was. Although his life was tragically taken far too early, the legacy that he leaves will be one that is felt for generations to come. Words and tributes, no matter how sincere, will never be able to heal the wound that his sudden departure has left. But hopefully those who knew and loved Menmeet will find some solace in the outpouring of tributes that continue to this day whenever his name is brought up. I know that none of the people that Menmeet touched with his life will ever forget him, and this province will not forget him. From the school which now bears his name in Calgary to the constituency that will soon this afternoon, I believe, forever remember him in this place where he served. So as we stand here today, let us all seek to answer Menmeet's call and remember why we are in this place, what drove him to this place, to serve, to build our communities, and to leave this province better than we found it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I rise just to advise the Assembly that pursuant to Standing Order 7-8, that the daily routine may continue beyond 3 o'clock p.m.
The Honourable Member for Calgary McCall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my honor to rise and respond to the statement made by the Premier. Let me begin by saying that the official opposition fully supports renaming Calgary McCall constituency to Calgary Bholar McCall in honor of the late Menmeet Singh Bholar. Madam Speaker, I'm honored that the constituency I represent will now pay tribute to Menmeet's contribution to Calgary and this province. Many of us were here in the legislature on the tragic evening in November of 2015 when we heard about Menmeet's accident, and we still mourn with the family for his loss. Madam Speaker, I had the honor and privilege this week of speaking with the Bholar's family, and this recognition is indeed important for the family and the entire community. Menmeet was well known for his dedication to public service and social justice, and work he did as an MLA and minister. I became Minister of Human Services in 2015 after Menmeet had been minister. I still remember the advice he gave me and that he was always available to take my calls and answer my questions. I'm sure many of us who work with him have fond memories of him to share. He will certainly be remembered for his public service, and it's a fitting tribute to his service. Northeast Calgary, as you know, is one of the most diverse parts of this province. As his family reminded me, naming places matters and can help kids in this community of Northeast and across Calgary see themselves reflected in our democratic institutions. It is important for the family and the community that they see Menmeet Singh Bholar's name alongside Frederick McCall's name is celebrated World War I veteran known for his heroic contribution to our country. In closing, I think this name change is a positive step and highlights the public service of an exemplary Albertan and Canadian. As member of this House, we should all strive to dedicate ourselves to the service of this province and make sure we leave this province in better condition than we found it in. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member statements.
Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Nevertheless, she persisted. It was originally said about a woman politician trying to make a valid point over the objections of those around her. But it became a rallying cry for so many women trying to make change that was once believed impossible. Words that I believe could be applied to the colleagues I stand beside each and every day in the face of this government. Colleagues that have pushed back on the government's war with healthcare workers, forced them to grudgingly halt their plans to strip mine the Rockies, and finally pushed them to agree to a childcare deal. Nevertheless, she persisted. When they told us that asking questions isn't classy and that we should settle down, kitty cat, through half-truths, arrogance, condescension, and mansplaining, they persist. And I am proud to stand with them to fight for the countless Albertans that we speak for. Alberta has been through so much. In a global pandemic, this UCP government acted last and least in every possible way. The UCP have ghosted Albertans when they needed support most, diminished the risks of COVID, refused to make schools safer, and attacked experts and mocked anyone with questions. People have lost loved ones, surgeries have been canceled, resulting in tens of thousands suffering lifelong impacts. This UCP government doesn't even have the good grace to look embarrassed. Women have had to step back to keep their children safe, have worked 2 jobs at once, but this government thinks they were taking time off. Despite being abandoned and ridiculed by the government meant to protect them, Albertans stand up. They stand up for each other, they stand up for science, for the environment, for children, for education, and for healthcare workers that in turn stand up for each and every one of us. Albertans have struggled in this pandemic and under the terrible decisions of this government. But nevertheless, she will persist, and we will overcome this terrible UCP government.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On November 23, 2015, a child fell over our province. On that day, Manmeet Pula, the former MLA for Calgary Montrose and Calgary Greenaway, passed away while trying to help another driver in distress on the QE2 highway. He was just 35 years old. This tragedy rocked the legislature at a time of political turmoil. Time stood still as we all looked shocked over life well lived. Manmeet had many remarkable career accomplishments in this short time on this earth. He had gone to school to become a lawyer, but his true calling was always public service. At 28 years of age, Manmeet became the youngest member elected to Alberta's 27th legislature. His skill as a legislator and ability as an orator soon saw him managing several important ministries, all while he worked tirelessly to elevate Alberta's Punjabi Sikh community. A deeply spiritual person, Manmeet was also a humanitarian. In one example, he crisscrossed the country, working selflessly on his own time to secure immigration approvals for Sikh families from Afghanistan who needed refuge in Canada. Manmeet was a gentle giant who towered over everyone who met him, but his work ethic, passion, and kindness remained his greatest personal qualities. Manmeet passed away as he lived, saving others, and I am so deeply honored that the government has introduced legislation to recognize him forever in the cultural fabric of our province. As you know, Madam Speaker, Bill 87 seeks to rename the constituency of Calgary-McCall to Calgary-Bula-McCall. Manmeet was Northeast kid through and through. I hope this entire legislature supports Bill 87. Elected officers can be grueling, but Manmeet showed us that this job can be done with a smile, with courage and kindness. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable honourable member for Calgary-Fish Creek.
Madam Speaker, this past Sunday, people of the Jewish faith gathered across our province to light the menorah and mark the beginning of Hanukkah, or the Festival of Lights. For 8 days, Jewish people will gather, pray, eat potato latkes, sing songs, and spin the dreidel. While celebrations and traditions around Hanukkah are fun-filled with light and laughter, this holiday was born in dark times, reflecting upon both survival and victory. The victory was that of the Maccabean Jews in retaking the holy city of Jerusalem after the outlawing of holy services and looting of the Second Temple. The Jewish people returned to see that there was only enough oil to provide light for a single day. Madam Speaker, that light lasted for 8 days and is one of the miracles of the Hanukkah. From biblical times through the Crusades to the programs of communist regimes and the evils of Nazi Germany, the faith and journey of the Jewish people, my family, and their hope for a brighter future has never waned. Through darkness will come light in the many stories told and those that may never be told. And I know these lessons resonate with all of us in a welcoming and just society. At this midpoint in celebrations, it reminds me that all Albertans can truly embrace the meaning and community-spirited messages of Hanukkah in the reflection of the steadfast resolve and resiliency of everyday Albertans. These are indeed challenging times, a major economic downturn, volatile energy prices, and a pandemic. But these are also a time for us to reflect with optimism on the limitless opportunities ahead. Hanukkah reminds us that through good deeds, we can be the light that shines over the darkness. We, in this chamber, can be the hope in difficult times. Madam Speaker, thank you to all of our dear friends of the Jewish faith, celebrating joyously with family and friends over the next few days. Shalom, may peace be with you, and Hag Hanukkah Sameach. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Albert.
Since 1992, the global community has been observing December 3rd as International Day of Persons with Disabilities as a result of a UN General Assembly resolution. Every annual observance is named and themed, and this year's theme is Promote Understanding of Disability Issues and Mobilize Support and Awareness. While we can all acknowledge raising awareness is important and often the first step towards making lasting change, it is hollow and meaningless if the day of celebration is not followed by a tangible shift towards the ultimate goal, which is the creation of a society where disabled citizens are not excluded but valued members. Every year, I look back and try to measure progress we as a province have made, and I believe we've lost ground under this UCP government. This government will trot out different ministers to boast about a few million invested here or there for something with the word disability in it, but they are missing the mark. These are little band-aids over open wounds of exclusion and isolation. In the last year, we've watched disabled Albertans sink further into poverty as a direct result of legislative changes made by the UCP. Legislative changes can be devastating on lives: de-indexing of all income support benefits, eliminating supplemental housing benefits, changing eligibility for income supports, and eliminating seclusion room bans, and on and on. Far too many disabled Albertans live in abject poverty, substandard housing, and are forced to rely on the charity of others for survival. Sadly, this government's only solution seems to be to give charities help fundraising instead of raising or addressing the causes of poverty and isolation. In 2004, the United Nations theme day of observance was Nothing About Us Without Us. It is my hope that this government quickly learns that failure to include all citizens who will be impacted by changes being proposed will result in more failures and more harm. I hope next year's IDPD, as it's known, the look backwards, will not be as disappointing as this year's. Thank you.
The honourable member for Peace River.
Madam Speaker, since August, tens of thousands of Albertans have been waiting to see if their hospitals, doctors, nurses will be told by Alberta Health Service leadership that they're not wanted anymore. Dozens of Alberta communities have been wondering if this rapitious and reckless plan would move access to life-saving health care even further away. This week, the government took steps to mitigate and intervened at the 11th hour on this crazed plan to just let entire towns lose their health care. By forcing AHS to allow rapid testing, the Minister of Health's directive is saving many communities from healthcare oblivion. AHS leadership has held a knife to the throat every day for 91 days to many of my remote communities by not implementing any Plan B. Qui curat? Who cares, Madam Speaker? That seems to be a fitting new motto for an organization that used to put patients first. I want to thank all AHS employees, vaccinated or not, for their service to our province and citizens during this pandemic. No matter how you feel about vaccine mandates, Albertans should be appalled by the way AHS leadership was willing to let this unravel. Essential healthcare workers would have been dismissed in communities already in short supply. Essential care, gone. How many cancer diagnoses missed, prescriptions not prescribed, and lives lost? And why? Are our tax dollars not worth as much? Are our most vulnerable, are sick and are dying, not worthy of care as well? AHS leadership has abandoned Albertans. In an absolute act of shame, their plan was to abrogate their obligation to the sick and dying Albertans and instead concentrate themselves with legal liability, crass ideology, capricious authoritarianism, or who knows what. Madam Speaker, so much moralizing has gone on from the world's public health authorities during this pandemic, but most of its smugness has been directed towards constituents like mine. They're now moralized the way to a point where they'd rather give up delivering health care itself rather than give up their pride. Trust is now severed with our health czars, likely beyond repair. Their unyielding plan would have left our most vulnerable constituents without care. Shame on them.
Hear, hear.
Period. I will now ask the honourable member for Edmonton, Glenora.
Madam Speaker, the fourth wave of COVID-19 has been devastating. More than 100,000 Albertans have tested positive since July 1st. 954 people died, and tens of thousands of Albertans had their surgeries cancelled. The damage from this fourth wave was even worse than any other because the Premier went to Europe and left no one in charge as cases rose. The government refused to tell Albertans who was in charge in August, so we foiped it. Looks like it was the Education Minister. So to the Education Minister, when were you briefed about the fourth wave and why did you do nothing?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that is completely ridiculous. I can inform the member and the House that the former Minister of Health continued to be on the job every single day, 7 days a week. It's true, he took a period of time with his family to have a bit of personal time. And I remember one day speaking to him during that so-called vacation. I said, how's it going? You get any time with the family? He said, well, I've been on the phone for 8 hours straight. I was talking to that minister every single day. But, Mr. Speaker, I guess what we're learning here is when the NDP took time off, they turned off their phones and they stopped working. That's never happened on this side of the building.
The Honourable Member from Glenora.
With all due respect, Madam Speaker, I'm not asking these questions of the Premier. We already know that he wasn't in charge, so he can stay seated. Madam Speaker, the documents say that the Education Minister was the acting Minister of Health. It's right here, Premier, in all of August. That means she would have been briefed on all health matters, including the pandemic. The Premier was abroad. The Health Minister was away. Once again, to the Minister of Education, when cases tripled and it was clear that action was needed, you did nothing. You must have wanted to. Why didn't you?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, what complete rubbish. And I'm just trying to figure out if the member actually knows how ridiculous this is. The letter to which she is referring is a formality for signing authority, period, Mr. Speaker. The former Minister of Health, the current Minister of Labour and Immigration, was fully engaged, spending hour after hour, day after day, while he wasn't in the office to sign things, Mr. Speaker. He was holding briefings. He was briefing cabinet committees. He was being briefed by his officials, making critical decisions, just as I was on a period of personal time. I guess that's not what the NDP did when they were on time, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Glenora.
Acting minister means being able to act, Premier. Acting ministers make decisions. They take meetings. They're kept in the loop. I know. I've done it. And it's the same with other Albertans when they get their co-workers to cover shifts for them when they take a week off. But only covering that's happening here is the Premier's attempt to cover it up. We asked this question weeks ago, and no one over there wanted to admit that they were in charge. Zero accountability. So to the Education Minister, what health matters did you act on during August? It says in your calendar that you were acting. Obviously, it wasn't the rapid spread of this deadly virus.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, all we're learning from this ridiculous line of questioning is that apparently the NDP cabinet just worked union hours. When they booked off at 5 p.m. and went home, it was over. If they took personal time, they were done. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, this minister, I spoke to him almost every single day, sometimes for 2-hour briefings while he was supposedly on holiday. But you know what? I said, I hope you're getting some time off. He said, you know what? At least the kids are getting a bit of time. Mr. Speaker, how dare the NDP suggest that members of government can't do their job while also spending a bit of time with their families? Shame on them.
The honourable member from Glenora, our second set of questions.
Madam Speaker, another troubling thing about this VoIP is that it shows that the Premier and the Health Minister took vacation at the same time. That is a shame. Not a good decision during a pandemic. The Premier had ample time to sort out vacation so everyone could get a break, Premier. And Albertans could still have leadership. So to the Premier, why did you approve the Health Minister's vacation at the same time as yours? Why did you both leave?
The honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely clear that I, the minister, and I believe all ministers, when they are on private time, continue to do their jobs, be in charge of their files. But let's be blunt, Mr. Speaker. I guess what we're learning is that when the current leader of the opposition would leave for weeks to her cottage in British Columbia to sample some of the products of the Okanagan Valley, Mr. Speaker, she wasn't in touch with her office, and God forbid the then Deputy Premier was in charge, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Glenora.
Maybe in the next question, the Premier will tell us what he was drinking when he was in Europe. Madam Speaker, this cuts to the heart of trust. Albertans deserve to know their leaders are in charge and in the know, especially when it comes to a deadly pandemic. The Premier wants Albertans to believe that he managed this response from time zones on an 8-hour difference from our own. But we know that there are no emails, no calls with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and action was delayed for weeks. Does the Premier really want us to believe it's too much to ask for him to coordinate his vacation with the Health Minister in the middle of a public health crisis?
The honourable Premier.
I will repeat yet again, Madam Speaker, that I was in constant contact with the Honourable Minister of Health, received regular briefings. All of that is on the record. But what we're really, it's as though when they imagine when, say, the President of the United States goes outside of Washington, that somehow the government shuts down, or when the Prime Minister's on the road, Tofino or something, that somehow the Government of Canada shuts down. Mr. Speaker, responsible leaders continue to do their jobs. They're responsible 24/7. That's how I've always regarded my job, Mr. Speaker.
Last supplemental to Edmonton Glenora.
Madam Speaker, this is important because we know the COVID situation can and does change rapidly. It's changing right now. This decision made by the Premier to leave and to let his Health Minister go as well meant no one was in charge. Frankly, we can't have this happen again, Premier. Not when the Omicron is emergent and it could pose a serious risk to public health. Omicron. Will the Premier commit to releasing public documents showing who is on vacation and who will be acting during the upcoming holiday season? It's too serious for the Premier not to take accountability.
Mr. Speaker, on Christmas Day, I hope to gather with some family in Calgary, and, I'll probably be checking my phone several times a day to see if I need to respond to any emergencies, as is typically the case, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's the burden of leadership. Why did apparently the NDP cabinet think when they booked off, their jobs were done? Wow. That's, Mr. Speaker, that's not the Alberta ethic, that's the NDP work ethic.
Here, here. The honourable member for Edmonton City Centre.
While the Premier attempts to gloss over his disastrous response to the fourth wave, the real truth becomes clear when you talk to the people in pain because of the UCP's negligence. Yesterday, I stood with Scott Wynot, an Airdrie man whose heart surgery was cancelled 3 times, and his post-operative care as well. He will likely never return to work or walk without great difficulty again. Scott is 56. But doctors say he may only live a few more years. There are thousands of cases like Scott's, Albertans abandoned by the UCP. So will the Premier tell this House exactly how many surgeries to date have been cancelled in the fourth wave?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've answered that question. Now, the good news is that AHS is now at 85% of their baseline surgical capacity. We're back on our way to 100%, and then higher from there to start bringing wait times down. Let us not forget that under the NDP, Wait times went up for virtually every significant procedure in the province, which is why this government added $900 million to the baseline health budget to implement our surgical initiative to get to acceptable wait times across the board. Why did the NDP vote against that $1 billion for Alberta surgeries?
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
What a shameful response to Mr. Wynot and thousands of other Albertans, because we know that over 15,000 surgeries were cancelled as of early November, but we also know that number is increasing every single day. People suffering in pain, their health worsening every day, suffering from anxiety and depression, and instead of accepting responsibility for their failure, this UCP government is trying to sweep those Albertans under the rug. The Premier knows exactly how many surgeries have been cancelled in the fourth wave, not the percentage capacity, the real number to date for their negligence. Will he give it to this House today, or like his fourth wave strategy, is he simply planning to ignore it and hope it goes away?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, the divisive NDP pretends that COVID is simply an Alberta challenge. I can assure the member that every province in Canada is facing surgical delays because of COVID. Quebec is at 85% of capacity for surgeries, just as Alberta is. But, Mr. Speaker, we do have to ask a more fundamental question. Why is it that every province in Canada has been so significantly challenged to provide for capacity here? That's a challenge I've given to the Honourable Minister of Health, to come back with a plan to increase capacity for ICUs and the fungibility between intensive care and surgical treatment.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Madam Speaker, this is the only province in Canada where the government sat paralyzed while the Premier sunned himself in Europe, letting the fourth wave rise and these 15,000 surgeries get cancelled and counting. Real Albertans suffering that it just seems to be a political inconvenience for this Premier. We can't solve this problem unless we understand the scale. So I wrote to the President of AHS today to ask for the number that the Premier refuses to provide. If he has even the slightest bit of compassion for Albertans like Scott Wynot and tens of thousands of others, he will stand and tell that number right now. So what will it be? Compassion for these victims of his crisis, or more spin to cover his failure?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, of course, we empathize with people whose surgeries have been affected by COVID-19 and people who've been affected by COVID-19, just as we empathize with the thousands of people who have been waiting unacceptably for surgical wait times even before COVID. This is a fundamental challenge for us as Albertans, Madam Speaker, and that's one reason why we've added nearly $1 billion to what was already Canada's second largest healthcare budget, the largest in Alberta history, to undo the damage of the NDP's growth in surgical wait times. Because, Madam Speaker, we have to put patients at the heart of our healthcare system, not ideology.
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Dacour.
The UCP are cutting the learner programs from income support in their red tape bill. This will be devastating to thousands of adult learners and newcomers who use this program to learn needed skills, such as language training. The regulation they claim will replace it clearly states that the minister only needs to fund it if there are available funds. Arbitrary grants through regulation is a much weaker process than guaranteed funding through legislation. To the Minister of Advanced Education, will you commit that you will not cut a single dollar from a program that helps struggling Albertans learn job skills?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, apologies. I'm interested to know why the members opposite keep opposing the changes that we have in the bill. These changes will allow us to offer more flexible options to Albertans, and I think we all know at this time we are struggling, continue to struggle with higher unemployment rates. We need to make every effort to help ensure all programs that we offer are supporting Albertans and unemployed Albertans to reskill, re-enter the workforce, and succeed. Again, I don't know why the members opposite are opposed to helping Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Dacour.
Correct answer was I won't. The NDP indexed income supports because it made a meaningful difference in people's lives and their ability to afford basic needs. UCP claimed to support this while in opposition, but immediately broke their word as soon as they're in government. UCP also kicked thousands of Albertans off the shelter benefits, which has pushed many Albertans out of their homes and onto the street. The UCP can't be trusted on this file. So can the Minister of Community and Social Services please explain, after all the harm his government has already done to vulnerable Albertans, why is he also coming after their ability to learn job skills?
The Honourable Minister of Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned so many times in the House in the last couple of weeks, Alberta government continue committed to help Albertans with income support and other disabilities so that they can meet their daily needs. Mr. Speaker, we've talked so many times in this House, ACE benefit, $1.3 billion, the highest in Alberta history. ACE benefits, $16.85 per month, the highest in the country. Mr. Speaker, facts speak louder than political rhetoric.
The honourable member from Tindacore.
The fact is, you cut their money. Cutting this learner income support is not the first time the UCP have attacked newcomers trying to learn job skills. Earlier this year, the UCP changed the eligibility for the learner income support and skills investment bursary, and far few people are qualifying. The UCP has still not answered our questions about this. Adult learners use these programs to help them gain skills for employment and to be able to better participate in their communities. Can the Associate Minister of Red Tape please explain why she thinks job training for adult learners and newcomers is red tape that needs to be cut?
Madam Speaker, that question is complete nonsense. Over $95 million is allotted in the provincial budget to support foundational learning programs. These programs are essential, but the members opposite don't want to help improve these programs. I can't understand why. We want to improve these programs to help more Albertans access diverse programming to reskill and upgrade their skills to enter the workforce. Again, I can't understand why they want to keep Albertans out of the workforce, Madam Speaker. That's what we're focused on through these changes, through red tape reduction, to improve the process and help get more Albertans back to work.
Members were getting a little bit yelly. Maybe this is a good time to remind all members to respect those that are speaking. The honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat.
Madam Speaker, Brooks Medicine Hat has a very strong and vibrant industrial sector, but while we are known for our natural gas, it isn't the only industrial product that we produce. The past few months, businesses have struggled to stay afloat because of worldwide economic recessions, as well as the collapse in oil prices. But I ran on a platform, as well as my colleagues, to bring fresh new ideas and a new perspective to our industrial sector. So recently, the Minister announced that pre-approved industrial zones are being created throughout the province. Can the Minister of Environment and Parks tell us what exactly a pre-approved industrial zone is?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Parks.
Madam Speaker, a dedicated industrial zone pilot project in Alberta's industrial heartland will establish a best-in-class regulatory framework that will help attract new investment and create good jobs for Albertans while continuing to meet important environmental outcomes. The designated industrial zone project is a government commitment to streamline our regulatory process in Alberta's industrial heartland. It's a unique system to create a competitive regulatory framework. We're excited about it, and we do believe it's going to attract a significant amount of investment to the province of Alberta.
The honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Given in my area, many depend on the good-paying jobs that industrial services provide for their families, and given the industrial sector across Alberta is served by many small businesses in the region who otherwise wouldn't exist without them, and given that these business relationships are dependent on the ability of our area to maintain existing projects and attract new investment, can the Minister tell the residents of Brooks Medicine Hat how the creation of these zones could help us out?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, many other areas in the province have expressed interest in doing a dedicated industrial zone, including the MD of Greenview, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, Red Deer, and Joffrey, and many other areas inside the province. Madam Speaker, the learnings that we're going to get from the dedicated industrial zone pilot that's happening right now will allow us to evaluate, test, and then improve the concept for potential application all across the province.
The Honourable Member for Brooks Medicine Hat.
Well, thank you again, Madam Speaker and the Minister. Given that natural gas and oil sector of Brooks Medicine Hat was hit particularly hard during the pandemic, and given that earlier worldwide collapse in oil prices may have caused hesitation when considering expanding operations or even new investment with industrial companies in the area, and given that this hesitation had a significant impact on jobs in my riding and the economic stability of many, is the same minister able to tell the members how pre-approved industrial zones will better position Alberta and specifically the wonderful constituency of Brooks Medicine Hat for recovery?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Parks.
Well, Madam Speaker, combined with other government initiatives such as the support for the petrochemical industry, such as the Alberta Petrochemical Initiative Program and the ongoing red tape reduction efforts inside the province, the designated industrial zone has the potential to help attract billions of dollars of capital investment and support thousands of direct and indirect jobs. Madam Speaker, and I'm proud to say one of the reasons that we saw an announcement for billions of dollars in investment in Fort Saskatchewan from the Dow project and thousands of jobs that go with it is because of the hard work that we've done on dedicated industrial zones in the province. And I anticipate when we make this concept work in places like Brooks and Medicine Hat, you'll see the same results, thousands of jobs and people going to work while meeting our environmental outcomes.
Here. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Yesterday, the Environment Minister stood in this House and defended the climate change denial coming from his caucus. This is what Albertans have come to expect from this government, but maybe today we'll see a different response when it comes to respecting the people who sent us here. Yesterday, the member for Vermilion Lloydminster responded to a constituent concerned about his climate change denial and insulted them as a person with limited self-awareness. Is it the policy of this UCP government to insult Albertans who disagree with them, or will the minister apologize for his colleagues' abuse of Albertans?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Madam Speaker, the member of the 30th Legislature who's had to apologize the most, who has risen in this place and wished female politicians dead, who attacked other people inside this chamber the other day and lost a point of privilege, is very rich to rise asking that question, Madam Speaker. When is he going to apologize for his behavior to this chamber? And when is he going to apologize for his party's behavior? When it comes to climate change, this government is proud of the work that we're doing with our industry to be able to make sure that we can meet our environmental obligations and still create thousands of jobs across the province. A sharp contrast from that member and his party who have dedicated their lives to trying to shut down the oil and gas industry inside Alberta.
Point of order has been noted. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Given that I apologize every day in this House, I know how easy it is. Given that the MLA for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright went on to accuse this constituent of being, quote, devoid of critical thinking skills, and given that I would hope that the minister would agree that this type of childish, insulting behavior towards an Albertan who took the time to write to their MLA is appalling conduct from an elected representative, can the government House Leader assure this House that the member will be issuing a correction and a personal apology to the constituent he insulted? Take it from me, it's easy.
Well, the Honourable Member and I finally agree on something. He sure has to apologize for a lot of silly things that he said inside this chamber, Madam Speaker. What is going on here, Madam Speaker, is again the NDP are trying to distract from what their party did just a few weeks ago when 85% of their membership voted to tell people and to support people illegally blocking pipelines. At the end of the day, that member and his party are 100% focused on trying to shut down the oil and gas industry inside this province, Madam Speaker. No, we will not ever apologize here or anywhere else for standing up for the men and women who work in our industry.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Given that all we're asking for is to treat Albertans with decency, and given that we were all elected by Albertans to represent them in this place, and given the shocking response to his constituents concerned by the unscientific and inaccurate views on climate change, the member for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright has indicated to his constituents that he is actually there to represent his views to them. Is it the policy of this government to defend climate change denial and attack those who disagree? Will the Environment Minister stand, issue a clear statement that climate change is real and that his UCP caucus mate is wrong? Or will he continue to stand by his childish insults of his MLA?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it's the policy of this government that climate change is a very real challenge and action must be taken, action is being taken. But it's also the policy of this government that Alberta is a democracy and that legislators have a right and a responsibility to share different views, to speak for their constituents. It's also the policy of this government that the NDP's effort to promote intolerance and to marginalize anybody who disagrees with their left-wing ideology is not consistent with the democratic idea, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
This UCP government paid their disgraced former staffer, Ivan Bernardo, more than $28,000 months after he left his job in the health minister's office and in a different fiscal year. The minister claims this is for unpaid expenses. Bernardo's publicly reported travel expenses only add up to about $300. So can the Premier, the Minister of Health, anyone tell this House specifically what Bernardo spent $28,000 on? Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, as I said yesterday, sexual harassment in the workplace or any place else is unacceptable. Mr. Bernardo was not employed by the government since December 2020, nor did he receive any severance payment. The payments were expenses incurred during Mr. Bernardo's previous period of employment. They were vetted and approved through the normal Treasury Board processes, and these were published in the Blues in 2021 Minister Office's expenses. They were expenses, nothing more than that.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands.
Given that Bernardo's expenses seem to have gone undetected for 2 years and for months after his contract expired, and we've seen no receipts, and given that Bernardo was a right-hand man for the member for Calgary-Acadia when he was health minister, can the Minister of Labour tell Albertans, was he aware that Bernardo was racking up tens of thousands of dollars of expenses? And if so, then did he approve them?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I understand, and once again, I understand that these went through the normal approval process. They were approved under the Treasury Board rules and guidelines. They were deemed appropriate expenses, and they were paid out on that basis.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands, Orwood.
Given that ministerial office expenses are audited on a rotational basis by the Auditor General, and given that Bernardo's $28,000 worth of expenses were paid out after the end of the fiscal year and fall outside of the Auditor's November 2021 audit, can the Minister of Finance then tell the House whether he has advised the Auditor General that there is a $28,000 discrepancy that requires his attention? And has the auditor had an opportunity to examine Bernardo's expenses?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I can confirm that those expense claims were filed within the time limits and within the prescribed procedures of Treasury Board.
The Honourable Member for Cypress, Medicine Hat. Order.
Contrary to the Finance Minister's messaging, Alberta's economy remains far from healthy. Alberta's unemployment is high, with rates in Calgary and Edmonton close to the worst in Canada. Meanwhile, the average earning powers of Albertans remain stuck, even before considering runaway inflation. Borrowing billions to dump into corporate welfare only benefits foreign investors and isn't doing much to help Alberta families. Running up more than $100 billion in debt and paying record-high interest may help Bay Street bankers, but it doesn't help Elkwater or Beaver Lodge. To the Finance Minister, how has your government become so detached from the real-life experience of Albertans?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, the member opposite has not read the mid-year fiscal report, because if he had, he would recognize that our interest expenditure is actually going to be a couple $100 million less than we budgeted. Why, Madam Speaker? Because we've maintained discipline in our expenditures. We've positioned the economy for investment, attraction, and growth, Madam Speaker, and we're borrowing less money.
Member for Cypress, Medicine Hat.
Madam Speaker, I guess if you spend all day handing out other people's money, you get a skewed view of reality. And given that despite having one of the youngest and best trained workforces in Canada, Albertans are helplessly underemployed, especially given what happens when you allow Trudeau to phase out our oil industry. And given you want to bring back the jobs that drive economic growth, we need a government willing to fight back. To the Premier, now that your elbow bump buddy Justin Trudeau has completely ignored the results of Alberta's equalization referendum, when do you intend to get your government to stand up for Albertans?
Remember, I'll take this opportunity to caution you on the use of preambles in your question. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to again point out that the member opposite has a very pessimistic view of Albertans in this province, Madam Speaker. Right now, Alberta is poised to lead the nation in 2021 and 2022 in economic growth. Madam Speaker, we're positioning the province for investment attraction. And Madam Speaker, we're seeing that investment come in by the billions. 2 weeks ago, we had a $7 billion week with Amazon Web Services and Northern Petrochemical Corporation. Investment is coming, our fiscal capacity is expanding, and jobs are returning to the province.
Given, like the carbon tax, runaway inflation is driving up the cost of everything from food to heat to transportation. Given it also robs Albertans another way through higher provincial taxes. Given in 2019, this government de-indexed provincial income tax brackets from inflation, and as a result, this government is poised to hurt Alberta families to the tune of hundreds of millions. And given the Premier once wrote in a column in the Calgary Herald describing bracket creep as a hidden and regressive tax grab. To the Premier, why is your government implementing a hidden and regressive tax grab?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, we have not raised personal income taxes, and we will not raise personal income taxes, Madam Speaker. What we are doing is growing the fiscal capacity and the economic capacity in this province, Madam Speaker. Our plan is working. Investment is pouring into this province. Jobs are being created, over 100,000 jobs since the start of the year, Madam Speaker. Our plan is working. Alberta's on track.
The Honourable Member for Central Peace Notley.
This government has introduced a bill that will allow this Premier's cronies to buy up to 400 memberships for other people, all while collecting their full tax credit for it. Yet the minister responsible keeps dodging opposition questions with claims that all this bill does is close a union loophole, a change which takes exactly 2 pages of this 300-page bill. Albertans had hoped the era of corruption and collusion ended with the PC administration, but it seems your government wants to get back to the good old days of stacking meeting halls and rigging votes. To the Premier, is this policy change you had in mind when you informed your caucus that you wanted a new base?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, none of what that member said is true. Madam Speaker, we made a commitment to the people of Alberta to get rid of big money out of Alberta politics, close the AFL loophole, ensure that only Albertans are able to participate in their election and determine the fate of our province. Madam Speaker, that is exactly what Bill 81 will accomplish.
Honourable Member for Central Peace Notley.
Given that the AFL loophole, like I said, is 2 pages, I'm not sure what the other 298 do, and given that this Bill 81 includes a loophole that will allow rich friends and lobbyists of the Premier to provide unlimited donations to nomination campaigns, funds that the winning candidates must transfer to the party, CA, or their own election campaign, and given this handy loophole will allow the government to undermine and circumvent Alberta's political contribution limits, and given that the government has been consistently out-fundraised by the opposition for the past year, to the Premier, your unpopularity makes it impossible for you to fundraise under the current rules. What makes you think Albertans would ever trust you to rewrite the political donation rules?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
You know, Madam Speaker, we have seen throughout the course of our history, foreign money out of our province, pouring into our province to impact our elections. Madam Speaker, in 2019, we made a commitment that we are going to reform the electoral legislation to take those money out of our politics. Madam Speaker, once again, this is a promise that we made to Albertans, and I am proud that we are keeping that commitment.
The Honourable Member for Central Peace Notley.
Given this government recently organized a public inquiry into anti-Alberta energy campaigns with the final report showing so-called Canadian-based environmental initiatives received foreign funding of at least $1.28 billion, and given this week the government brought forward Bill 81, which will allow non-Albertan anti-pipeline activists to both register as third-party advertisers and donate to these funds for referendum questions and Senate races, so long as they're otherwise active in other Canadian provinces. To the Premier, why are you opening up a loophole that will allow foreign-funded, Canadian-based environmental initiatives to spend millions attempting to sway Alberta voters?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, it is so rich coming from that particular member who ran on that particular platform in 2019 with the commitment, to make sure, that we close that AFL loophole right now, Madam Speaker, without belated 100 hundreds of millions of dollars could be donated to parks, and that is the same loophole that third parties have used to influence our elections, mostly going to NDP-allied candidates. Madam Speaker, I am proud that once and for all, we are closing that loophole.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Whiteland.
Madam Speaker, after much delay and political game playing, the UCP finally signed a childcare deal with the federal government months after other provinces. But childcare providers have been begging this government for more support for months so they could try and stay open for the families who desperately need them. But little to no help came, so providers are now being forced to raise their fees, much to the shock of parents. To the Minister of Children's Services, how could she not see this coming? We've been warning her about this for months. How does she explain putting childcare providers in this position?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Children's Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We did work hard to get a Made in Alberta agreement with the federal government to support the choices that parents are making for childcare right across the province, Mr. Speaker. And we also heard the calls from childcare operators right across the province around some of the struggles that they were facing when it came to COVID-19. That is why, Madam Speaker, we provided $110.4 million in pandemic relief, $27 million through the Child Care Relief Program, $72 million through provincial and federal government Safe Restart Agreement, Madam Speaker, $11.4 million through surplus from last year's budget, $16.2 million through the critical worker benefit, and more.
Given that Kim Goldenberg said her childcare fees are going up 11% on January 1st and that, quote, thought we were making childcare more affordable, not less. And given that Julie Audi said, quote, this will not reduce my fees as much as they made it out to. And given that day home provider Heather Sanduga said, quote, I'm still not sure what to do and day homes have no idea what, when, or how the funding is working yet. So frustrating to have no plan at all. I'm in a lose-lose situation. To the Minister, parents feel their fees are going up, while providers feel their support is going down. Does the Minister take responsibility for this frankly terrible communication and confusion?
Wow.
The Honourable Minister of Children's Services.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Now, if parents are concerned when they're speaking to the member opposite, I would encourage the member opposite to get the facts and then share those with parents who reach out to her, Madam Speaker. We committed to be very transparent with operators and with parents. In fact, last week we sent out a letter outlining the next steps of this plan, and that included a letter directly to parents so that we could answer their questions and let them know that we are hearing their concerns. Also, Madam Speaker, their fees will be going down starting in mid-January. That is only a number of weeks away, on average by half in every licensing.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Whiteland.
Well, I'm more than happy to do the Minister's job for her, given that despite dragging their heels to sign the deal, the rollout is messy and thoughtless, with parents of fully subsidized infants seeing a fee reduction of maybe $10 per month, leaving the lowest income families to benefit the least from this deal. And given that operators were told by this minister that funding would include kindergarten-age children, but now they seem to be excluded, just like all other out-of-school care programs. And given the UCP didn't follow the lead of other provinces to build up capacity in the ministry to handle and implement these important changes, can the minister explain why she's creating so much confusion in rolling out this program when she had so much time to consult and get it right?
The Honourable Minister of Children's Services.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know what was messy? When the NDP government chose have and have not parents, have and have not operators. And we know what they would have done, Madam Speaker. They would have signed on the dotted line the first plan that crossed the table. They would have cut out private operators. They would have handed over Albertans' programming to Justin Trudeau and the federal government in Ottawa. We will not sell out Albertans. We are listening to them. That is why we created a plan that is adaptive and based on their feedback, Madam Speaker. All parents right across this province will see a reduction on average by half, starting right away in January. That is excellent news. We know their track record, Madam Speaker, and we are not following their lead.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Fish Creek.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Alberta began to see a significant slowdown in the pace of COVID-19 vaccination in August and early September, coinciding with the beginning of the fourth wave. We were alarmed by increasing hospitalization rates across our province, and ICU capacity was struggling to accommodate unprecedented demand. Can the Minister please share with the House what factors may have led to the slowdown of vaccine uptake in August and early September, and what measures were taken to accelerate it?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the thoughtful question, and the member from Calgary-Fish Creek. Madam Speaker, by August, uptake was slowing due to vaccine hesitancy. For some, this hesitancy was due to accessibility issues. Others were concerned with their safety or their own medical history. Madam Speaker, many Albertans recognize COVID vaccines are safe and effective, and that's why, Madam Speaker, I'm focusing on education and accessibility, such as the vaccination bus, to increase uptake. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health has also had several town halls to address vaccine hesitancy, such as among expectant mothers, and the numbers have increased.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Fish Creek.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given that the restriction exemption program was launched to protect Albertans, support Alberta businesses, slow down the transmission rate, bring down COVID-19 cases, and decrease the tremendous impact that the fourth wave had on our healthcare system, and given that over the ensuing period we witnessed encouraging trends in our vaccination rates and hospitalizations, can the same Minister please share the impact of the REP on vaccine uptake across Alberta?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To be clear, we introduced the restrictions exemption program to reduce the spread of COVID-19, and Madam Speaker, it has worked. When we introduced the REP on September 15th, there were just over 18,500 cases. Yesterday, there were under 4,700. Positivity rates, hospitalizations, and ICU admissions have also all dropped. Now, Alberta's vaccination rate have also increased during this period of time. This was an additional impact of the program, but again, the principal purpose of the REP was to reduce transmission, and that's what it has done.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Fish Creek.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you again to the Minister. Given that until recently Alberta experienced lower vaccination rates than many other Canadian jurisdictions, and given that vaccines have thus far proven to be safe and effective in fighting against COVID-19 hospitalizations, to the same Minister, how will you continue to share vaccine efficacy with Albertans now and into the future?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thanks again for the thoughtful question. First, I should mention the importance of being respectful with our friends and neighbours while discussing this topic. And I also want to thank all those who've got vaccinated. Madam Speaker, we are just under 89% of first doses, which is tremendous success in terms of the increase of vaccination. Now, Madam Speaker, we recently put out a household mailer focused on the message that vaccines are safe and effective. The Alberta website has a page on vaccine myths that makes a great starting point. The science and the data support those statements, and as Albertans continue to have questions about COVID-19, we urge them to reach out to their healthcare practitioners, or they can dial 811 to get more, and I'm looking forward to increasing the vaccination.
The Honourable Member for Calgary McCall.
The cost of insurance is skyrocketing for Albertans, which is entirely the responsibility and fault of this UCP government. Businesses are seeing insurance costs skyrocket by double sometime, triple digits sometime increases. One business in my constituency reported that their insurance spiked from $7,800 to over $20,000 this year. Will the Minister of Finance commit to doing something, anything to keep this business from closing, or does he just not care like his colleagues?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and President of Treasury Board.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the member opposite raising this issue because it is a very real issue for Alberta businesses broadly. In fact, it's an issue for businesses right across the country. We're in a hard insurance market these days. At times of a hard insurance market, premiums go up. Product offerings come down. Madam Speaker, we've been working with the insurance industry in this province and nation, pressing them to find solutions. Madam Speaker, we just passed Bill 76, the Captive Insurance Corporations Bill, which will provide some release to certain businesses.
The Honourable Member for Calgary McCall.
Given that Alberta families are still being hammered with high auto insurance after this government lifted the cap and then sat back and watched the premiums grow. And given that Premier couldn't care less about squeezing families struggling during a pandemic, in fact, he once claimed he didn't see a problem because his own personal vehicle insurance had dropped.
Yeah.
Minister, families are being forced to park a car or take the bus to the work. Families right across this province. Can't this government cut them a break?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, the insurance premiums have been going up across sectors, across insurance types, Madam Speaker, and there has been pressure on automobile insurance premiums. And, Madam Speaker, that's why we brought in Bill 41 last fall. Bill 41, Madam Speaker, brought in a whole host of recommendation solutions, ultimately, that have stabilized insurance premiums. And I'm pleased to say, Madam Speaker, that through June to August this year, there's been a 3-month average 4% premium decrease compared to last year.
The honourable member for Calgary-McCall.
Given that Bill 41 didn't help families and businesses from Peace River to Medicine Hat who are struggling with the cost minister is piling on them, and given that unless he takes action, this minister's legacy will be pricing Albertans out of their business, homes, and cars.
Yeah.
If the entire government cabinet won't do anything to help Alberta families and businesses, who exactly do they serve? It certainly isn't the people they elected them.
Yeah. The honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. This government is taking action. That's why we brought in Bill 41 to stabilize and actually reduce automobile insurance premiums. Madam Speaker, that's why we brought in Bill 76, the Captive Insurance Corporations Act, to provide another option for businesses in this province and across the nation to attract additional capital into this province. And Madam Speaker, on top of that, we're focused on the economy. We're focused on providing Albertans additional opportunities, career opportunities, opportunities that will improve their incomes and outcomes, Madam Speaker. Alberta is back, Madam Speaker. Our economic recovery plan is working.
Honourable member for Calgary-Mountain View.
Whatever it is, the war room budget is too high, but we at least deserve transparency. In estimates in March, the minister said, quote, for the 2020-2021, the total budget for the Canadian Energy Centre is forecast to be $10 million. However, the war room itself claimed the budget this year was $3.7 million, a claim supported by the annual report. This is an unaccounted difference of $6.3 million. So a very simple question for the Energy Minister. What happened to $6.3 million, Minister? Albertans deserve accountability.
Good question.
The honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's really clear that the NDP don't want the Canadian Energy Centre to succeed. They never wanted it to succeed because they don't want our energy sector to succeed. That's so clear, Madam Speaker, in their support of the protesters who are illegally blockading Coastal GasLink. Madam Speaker, they simply are against our energy sector. They're against the Canadian Energy Centre. They're against anything that our government has ever done to stand up for our energy sector.
The honourable member for Calgary-Mountain View.
Given that losing $6.3 million is a problem for people of all political stripe, and given that in addition to the $10 million in war room funding, the minister stated in estimates they were forecasting to spend $19 million on other advocacy, but she refused to disclose a single project that money would pay for. And given that Albertans deserve to know how every cent of their money is spent, another very simple question to the Minister of Energy. Specifically, what was $19 million spent on? Will the minister table the receipts in the House?
Good question. The honourable Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The member opposite clearly does not have a clue what she's talking about. In estimates, we give estimates of what might be spent in the future, Madam Speaker. The Energy Centre budget comes out of a broad energy advocacy budget that's spent for things like advocating for hydrogen. I would suggest maybe the members opposite don't want us to advocate for hydrogen. It's advocating for critical and rare earth minerals. It's advocating for pipelines. It's the entire energy sector advocacy budget. But it's clear, Madam Speaker, they don't want the energy sector to succeed.
The honourable member for Calgary-Mountain View.
Given that the minister has been unable to account for this $25 million spent last year, Madam Speaker, of other people's money, and given the long track record of the UCP of hiding from accountability, I will ask the minister once more. Specifically, what did we get for $19 million in other advocacy last year, and what happened to $6.3 million difference between what you said you sent to the war room and what they received? If she can't or won't answer those questions, will she commit to making the war room subject to FOIP so we can find out ourselves?
Good question.
Honourable members, just to note that we heard that question very clearly, and I hope we can hear the answer very clearly. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member opposite knows, every penny the government spends is subject to estimates, it's subject to accounts. It's all there. If the member opposite would just simply pick up the government documents and read it, perhaps she would have the answer.
The point of order noted. The Honourable Member for Taber-Warner.
Speaker, COVID-19 has ravaged the world for 2 years. People are trying to cope and adjust with all that has been thrown at them. Hope of a brighter future is waning. But also of concern is the shift away from a society of law and order. There aren't enough police to protect every street corner. Therefore, it becomes every citizen's responsibility to live peaceably with each other. Can the Minister update the House on how our government is supporting a strong society built on law and order?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for that question. Madam Speaker, it is true that the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult on communities and people. But Albertans persist, Madam Speaker. Throughout the pandemic, the men and women of law enforcement have stood firm to ensure the safety of our communities. Madam Speaker, this government is committed to supporting our men and women in blue. We have committed this year to spending $89 million through policing support programs, and we will ensure our police services continue to have the resources they need.
The Honourable Member for Taber-Warner.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Speaker, COVID-19 has necessitated the unfortunate universal wearing of masks in public, and because of this, some have used it as cover to go into stores and smash and grab merchandise. And given that we are seeing a rise in this type of criminal behavior, what is the government doing to stem this tide of lawlessness?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the member for that important question. Madam Speaker, we know the deep impact crime has had on our communities and our people. That is why this government is proud to be tough on crime. We have strengthened deterrent to trespassing with 5-fold increases to maximum fines and possible prison time. And Madam Speaker, we have protected law-abiding property owners from civil liability for injuries to criminal trespassers. Madam Speaker, this side of the House takes crime seriously, and we will continue to take action to stop it in its tracks.
The Honourable Member for Taber-Warner.
Madam Speaker, during this COVID pandemic, the criminal element seems to have become emboldened even more. And given that rural policing is stretched to the breaking point, and given that some rural business owners are being forced to sleep at their businesses or in their Quonset because they have been broken into so many times that they can't get insurance, what can we do to help our besieged rural Albertans?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the member for that question once again. Madam Speaker, our government continues to take tangible action on rural crime. We have created the Rural Alberta Provincial Integrated Defence Force to reduce response time. Madam Speaker, we appointed our first ever Chief Firearms Officer. We appointed Alberta's first parole board. We protected property owners. We invested in new crime prosecutors. And Madam Speaker, we are consulting on a potential Alberta Provincial Police Service, just like our neighbours are in Saskatchewan. Madam Speaker, this United Conservative government is ensuring that rural Albertans have everything.
Well, members, that concludes oral question period. You will now have 30 seconds to exit the chamber, should you wish to do so. Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Earlier this week, I asked the Premier about his decision to exempt some healthcare workers from the AHS COVID vaccine mandate, and he declared, Patients must come first. If we were to begin removing healthcare workers in certain rural areas, we'd be unable to provide essential and emergency medical services. Maybe the NDP doesn't care if somebody has a heart attack in Rocky Mountain House, if they're 90 minutes to the closest hospital, but this government will always act in the best interest of Albertans. Madam Speaker, where was that Premier on May, June, and July as we saw rolling closures of ERs due to shortages of doctors and nurses, leaving patients 60 or 90 minutes from the next closest hospital? Where was his concern for retaining healthcare workers as his government went to war with doctors and demanded wage cuts from nurses fresh out of the third wave? Where was his passion for protecting patients in Alberta in August as case counts rose and his government sat paralyzed while he sunned himself in Europe? Where was his concern for the best interest of patients as his government's repeated decisions to put their political interests ahead of public health pushed our healthcare system to the limits? Madam Speaker, as of November 3rd, 15,000 Albertans had life-changing surgeries canceled because of this Premier's best summer ever, and that number continues to rise. People's lives have literally been cut short. Thousands of others will live with life-altering health impacts. EMS wait times are soaring, clinics are closing, doctors are leaving, we have a critical shortage of nurses, and just this week, 3 more rural hospitals announced temporary closures of surgical services and ERs, all because of this government's bad decisions and utter lack of leadership on COVID-19. Madam Speaker, it's abundantly clear. This government's actions have never been about the best interests of patients, the best interests of Albertans. They've been about the interests of this Premier and his willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone in his desperate bid to cling to power. Albertans deserve a government honest, transparent, that puts them first. That's what we'll continue fighting to bring them.
Madam Speaker, this pandemic has been a nightmare for so many. It has created division in our community. Businesses have struggled. People have experienced job loss. Families have lost loved ones. Individuals have feared for their liberty. Children have suffered. The already vulnerable have been faced with more barriers. Many have become vulnerable during this time. Across the province, we have faced addiction, mental illness, domestic violence, and the list goes on. But there is hope. The economy is turning around, and with it, prosperity for Albertans and a greater ability to help all Albertans get through this crisis. As you know, our government released the 2021-2022 mid-year fiscal update. Alberta's recovery plan is getting the province's economy back to work. Efforts to make Alberta the most competitive business environment in North America are working. Corporate income tax revenue of $2.9 billion is forecasted, $1 billion more than what was predicted in February's budget. A few critical forecasts look at the deficit for the year at $5.8 billion, which is $12.4 billion lower than what was estimated. Total revenue is forecasted $57.9 billion, $14.2 billion higher than what was estimated. Mm-hmm. Taxpayer-supported debt is forecasted at $101.6 billion on March 31st, 2022, and this is $9 billion lower than what was estimated in the budget. The net debt to GDP ratio is calculated at 19.2% at the end of this fiscal year, well below our province's commitment to keeping net debt below 30% GDP. After the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, Alberta is emerging stronger than ever. Our economy is more diversified than ever, and I'm excited about what that means for Albertans. As our economy grows, so will our community's ability to help those who have struggled throughout this pandemic and ensure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed in our society. Let us not focus on what divides us, but on what brings us together as we chart a path forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This week, the Finance Minister attempted to slap some lipstick on a pig and paint a hopelessly optimistic picture of this government's stewardship of Alberta's economy. With high unemployment, higher underemployment, rapid inflation, and wage growth stalled, you can forgive Albertans for refusing to buy what he's selling. As a province, we have every conceivable advantage, and we should be the freest and most prosperous jurisdiction in North America. But we're not, and you don't need a PhD to diagnose the problem. Through a hodgepodge of misguided international agreements and globalist policies, Canada's federal government is employing every tool at its disposal to destroy Alberta's natural resource sector. Canada's eastern elites have fully embraced the World Economic Forum's Great Reset with both arms. They do not care if they destroy Alberta's economy, communities, or families in the process. Madam Speaker, Alberta needs a government that is willing to stand up to Ottawa, as well as the unelected bankers and billionaires who are trying to dictate economic policies across our country, province, and around the globe. Such rigid centralization of control always comes with a cost, from reduced growth to falling wages to job losses to rapid inflation to runaway debt. We are now seeing all of this and more. We need to get back to putting Alberta families and communities first in every single thing we do. We need an honest commitment from government to restoring and expanding Alberta's economy and individual freedoms. We also need to get back to the common sense community and family values that have served Alberta so well for so many generations. Under the failed leadership of the least popular premier in Canada, a serial flip-flopper who has to pay people to support him, Albertans did not get the government they were promised. It is time for something different. It's time for a new approach, one that can bring about real, meaningful change and help our province reach its true potential. To all those Albertans struggling to make ends meet, and to all those relegated to the sidelines by this failed government's new normal, I am listening, I am here, we all deserve better.
The honourable member for Banff-Kananaskis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, people travel from all around the world to see and experience the sights of beautiful Banff-Kananaskis. Many of them come to hike, bike, ski, snowshoe on the most amazing trails in the world. But with 5 million visitors last year, 1 million more than the busiest national park in the entire country, the Kananaskis region began to need additional supports to keep its beauty pristine and its wildlife safe. Residents of my riding have long seen the need for this important work. For years, it's been nearly impossible to find adequate garbage disposal facilities or even proper trail signage. So that's why we introduced the Kananaskis Conservation Pass. In the first fiscal quarter of sales, the KCP has already raised more than $10 million that will go directly towards resources and upkeep of the park. With this new revenue injection, visitor information centers will reopen, 20 new conservation officers will be hired, and $550,000 will be funneled to volunteer organizations to help them continue their trail building and maintenance. $100,000 for the Friends of Kananaskis, $100,000 for the Moose Mountain Bike Trail Society, $100,000 for the Canberra Area Mountain Bike Association, and $250,000 for the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association. But the good news doesn't stop there. Our government also recently tabled the Trails Act. Alberta's trail networks have been built by literally hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours, but they've never been fully recognized through public policy as other users of Crown land have. So with the introduction of the Trails Act, trails for hiking, biking, skiing, and all other recreational uses can be designated as Crown assets, meaning that other users of the land will have a duty to protect them or relocate them if their protection cannot be guaranteed. And for the first time, the trails that we use and love will be protected through legislation and recognized as the true economic drivers that they are. So, Madam Speaker, our government knows that the mountains need to be protected, but they also need to be enjoyed. Recreational tourism has the potential to be a tremendous economic driver for our province, and with continued investment and public policy changes, you can guarantee that it soon will be.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions. Notices of motions.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Parks.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give oral notice on two motions. First, oral notice on Government Motion 109, sponsored by myself, as follows: be it resolved that when further consideration of Bill 78, Alberta Housing Amendment Act 2021 is resumed, not more than 1 hour should be allotted to any further consideration of the bill in committee of the whole, at which time every question necessary for the disposal of the bill at this stage shall be put forthwith. I also rise to give oral notice of Government Motion 110, sponsored also by myself. Be it resolved that when further consideration of Bill 78, Alberta Housing Amendment Act 2021 is resumed, not more than 1 hour shall be allotted to any further consideration of the bill in third reading, at which time every question necessary for the disposal of the bill at that stage shall be put forthwith.
Introduction of bills, tabling returns and reports.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Glenora has a tabling.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I actually have two. The first one is the calendar for the Minister of Education, showing that she was the acting minister for Minister of Health, August 3rd through 29th inclusive. And the second tabling I have, Madam Speaker, it's not every day that hundreds of high school students in Calgary get together and create a petition, but they have. Madam Speaker, they're going to be of voting age in the next election, and they are pleading with this government to make diploma exams optional this year instead of making them mandatory.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, during yesterday's question period, I referred to a piece of article that deals with what the circumstances around the Chief Executive Officer of ASAT. Madam Speaker, I do have 5 copies of that article that I referred to in question period for consideration.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Ellerslie.
Yes, Madam Speaker, during this morning's debate on Bill 84, I cited from two articles from the state of Delaware. The first one is by the firm of Troutman Pepper, called The Importance of Well-Crafted Corporate Opportunity Waivers in Private Equity and Venture Capital Investments. And the second one was from Romano Law, an article called The Waiver of Fiduciary Duties in Delaware by Nicole Hatch.
The Honourable Member, any other members wishing to do a tabling? Seeing none.
Tablings to the clerk. Deferred divisions.
Honourable Members, pursuant to Standing Order 32.1 and notice provided by the Associate Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, the division called for on third reading of Bill 87, the Electoral Divisions Calgary-Bular-McCall Amendment Act 2021 during today's morning sitting shall now be conducted. Honourable Members, please note that pursuant to Standing Order 32.1 sub 4, the interval between division bells is 1 minute. Ring in the bells, call in the members. Members, the division has been called on Bill 87 in third reading. All those in favour, please stand.
Honourable Mr. Kenny. Honourable Mr. Schweitzer. Honourable Mr. Madu. Honourable Ms. Schultz. Honourable Mr. Chandra. Honourable Mr. Copping. Honourable Mrs. Savage. Honourable Mr. Nixon. Honourable Mr. Taves. Honourable Minister LaGrange. Honourable Mr. Wilson. Honourable Mr. Glubish. Honourable Mr. Horner. Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, Mr. Long, Ms. Armstrong-Hominuk, Mr. Turton, Mr. Amory, Honourable Mr. Orr, Honourable Mr. Luan, Honourable Ms. Pond, Mr. Scow, Honourable Mr. Nally, Honourable Mr. Ellis, Honourable Mr. Yassine, Honourable Ms. Furr, Ms. Lovely, Mr. Van Dyken, Mr. Rain, Mr. Dreeshen, Mr. Yao, Mr. Reid, Mr. Smith, Mr. Walker, Mr. Getson, Mr. Nixon, Mrs. Fry, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rosewell, Mr. Jones, Mr. Milliken, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Singh, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Gray, Member Ceci, Member Hoffman, Ms. Goring, Mr. Rutherford, Ms. Renault, Mr. Fian, Ms. Renault, Ms. Pancholi, Member Irwin, Mr. Egan, Mr. Dang, Mr. Tour, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Gottfried, Mr. Nielsen, Member Carson, Mr. Schmidt, Ms. Sigurdsson, Mr. Dack, Mr. Diol, Member Loyola, Mr. Lowen, Mr. Barnes.
Any opposed, please stand. That is carried.
Speaker, total for the motion 67, total against 0.
That is carried again.
Bill 87 on the 12 divisions, Calgary, Boular, McCall, Amendment Act 2021 is now read a third time.
Members, we're now points of order. There's a point of order raised by the official opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The point of order at 2:11. The member for Edmonton Gold Bar was asking about the appalling conduct for the member of Vermilion Lloydminster, who, after sharing unscientific and accurate views on climate change in this chamber, told the constituent who contacted him concerned about those remarks that the constituent must be a person with limited self-awareness and devoid of critical thinking. Now, rather than responding to the questions from the member from Edmonton Gold Bar, the government House Leader chose to distract, bringing up unrelated matters, but more importantly, under Standing Order 23 H and J, chose to accuse the member from Edmonton Gold Bar of attacking members inside this chamber, which is dangerous, disrespectful, inaccurate, but also ironic, given he said this while pointing at the member from Edmonton Gold Bar. The member from Edmonton Gold Bar has not attacked members inside this chamber. That language, especially accusing an individual member of doing such a behavior, is inappropriate. I would submit this is not a matter of debate. His language went too far at that point. I would ask that the government House Leader apologize and withdraw.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The Lieutenant Governor is waiting, so I won't waste time with the silliness. Happy to withdraw and apologize.
Consider the matter dealt with and concluded. There's a second point of order raised at 2:39 by the official opposition House Leader.
Very much, Madam Speaker. At this point, the member from Calgary Mountain View was asking the Minister of Energy about budget differences between estimates and the annual report, $6.3 million for the Canadian Energy Centre, as well as $19 million of other advocacy for which no details have been provided. Given the War Room is not subject to FOIP, transparency from the Minister is incredibly important. Unfortunately, in her response, the Minister of Energy not only avoided answering the questions, but under 23J decided to start using insulting language, saying the member opposite doesn't have a clue, and then a few minutes later saying that the member opposite needs to pick up the documents and read them. Implying that the member from Mountain View, a lawyer, a former minister, is not able to read the documents. I think this is below the level of decorum in this debate, as well as counter to House of Commons Procedure and Practice, page 623. I simply think this is not a matter of debate. I believe all members of this chamber are able to read. The minister was being too insulting. I submit this is a point of order and ask that she apologize and withdraw.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, those comments in this point of order is utterly ridiculous. This certainly is a matter of debate. The Minister of Energy is 100% correct that the answer and the numbers that she was referring to in the answer for questions are right there in black and white to be read. Now, I assume that the honourable member could read it, But maybe she should before she comes here and tries to debate something. That said, Madam Speaker, it's a matter of debate. And again, the Lieutenant Governor is waiting to join us. I've heard, Madam Speaker, while I know the disdain for the monarchy often comes out from the NDP, this is ridiculous to use point of orders to delay that process.
Perhaps the second part of your comments were not necessarily helpful. However, I would tend to agree that this is a matter of debate. I have a copy of the Blues here where the Minister states, if the member opposite would just simply pick up the government documents and read them, perhaps she would have the answer. Well, always not necessarily helpful in a question period. It is certainly not in violation of our standing order rules and is not a point of order, and I consider this matter dealt with. Honourable members, we will now proceed to royal assent. At this time, I would ask that you please put away all your electronic devices. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor, will now attend upon the Assembly.
Madam Speaker, Her Honour, the Honourable Lieutenant Governor awaits.
Sergeant at Arms, admit Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor.
All rise, please.
Please be seated. May it please Your Honour, the Legislative Assembly has, at its present sitting, passed certain bills to which, and in the name of the Legislative Assembly, I respectfully request Your Honour's assent.
Your Honour, the following are the titles of the bills to which Your Honour's assent is prayed. Bill 49, Labour Mobility Act. Bill 74, Advanced Education Statutes Amendment Act 2021. Bill 75, Arts Professions Recognition Act. Bill 76, Captive Insurance Companies Act. Bill 77, Municipal Government Restoring Tax Accountability Amendment Act 2021. Bill 82, Mineral Resource Development Act. Bill 83, Environmental Protection and Enhancement Amendment Act 2021. Bill 84, Business Corporations Amendment Act 2021. Bill 85, Education Statutes Students First Amendment Act 2021. Bill 87, Electoral Divisions Calgary-Brulard-McCall Amendment Act 2021. Bill 207, Reservists Recognition Day Act. These are the bills to which your honor's assent is prayed. In Her Majesty's name, Her Honor, the Honorable the Lieutenant Governor, doth assent to these bills.
Her Honor, the Honorable the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to sincerely express my gratitude and thanks to each and every elected official and to all the Assembly staff for your commitment to serving Albertans and our province as you do every single day. I know that the last 20 months or so have been challenging, not only for us in Alberta, but in Canada and globally, as we all know. But I do hope that over the next few weeks, you can all take some time to relax and spend some precious moments with your families and your loved ones. And my hope for you for the holiday season is that you enjoy the blessings of peace, love, laughter, and most importantly, hope that we are going to be okay. So I just wanted to wish you, thank you all, Merry Christmas and all the very, very best to each one of you for the next year. Thank you so much.
All rise, please.
Well, members, we are now at orders of the day. You may be seated.
Government motions. Motion number 104, adjourn debate on amendment. Honourable Mr. Nally.
Well, members, we are on Amendment A1. I see the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and let me say what a pleasure it was to receive a vice-regal visit from Her Honour the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor and to hear her extemporaneous season's greetings to members of this place, and I'd like to echo her wonderful sentiments. Madam Speaker, as you know, this motion addresses the Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada project. Initially, this is an amendment to Motion 104, which began, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly, 1, condemn David Suzuki's comments on pipelines as reported by the National Post, 2, condemn any comments made calling for the intentional destruction of energy infrastructure, and 3, unequivocally condemn incitements of violent eco-terrorism. This amendment seeks to add the following, which would be resolved that the Legislative Assembly express solidarity with the 20 First Nation band councils and their communities situated along the approved route of the Coastal GasLink pipeline project, including those representing Wet'suwet'en people, in their negotiations for project agreements that would support those communities, express its support for the Coastal GasLink pipeline project and the LNG Canada project, and expressed its opposition to illegal activities that seek to disrupt the construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline project, unquote. Mr. Speaker, I did speak to the main motion prior to amendment, and specifically at the time last week, the inflammatory, irresponsible, and outrageous comments that had been made by CBC television personality David Suzuki. I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Suzuki has seen fit to retract and apologize unequivocally for his remarks. I would, however, note how many commentators, broadly from the Canadian left, didn't apologize for, but rather excused and defended his remarks and criticized the motion that sought an apology, when even he recognized, Mr. Speaker, that he had massively overstepped in legitimizing, through his comments, possible violence through ecoterrorism against pipeline projects. But he was a bigger man than his critics. We all know, Mr. Speaker, when we make a serious mistake or seriously in a leadership position, when we say something that is truly regrettable, it takes a degree of humility to recognize that and to step back. So good on Dr. Suzuki for having done so, and I am happy in that respect to put the matter behind us, and I hope that his fellow travelers will learn, Mr. Speaker, that it is dangerous and wrong to effectively legitimize, even indirectly or unintentionally, violence as a political tool. Now, having said that, around the same time that Dr. Suzuki made those comments, the Provincial Council of the Alberta NDP passed the following motion, and I quote, "For the Alberta NDP to express its solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en First Nation, denounce the violence enacted against members of Wet'suwet'en First Nation and land defenders by the RCMP, and to call on the BC NDP government and the federal government of Canada to immediately withdraw the RCMP from Wet'suwet'en territory and halt the Coastal GasLink pipeline project until the free, prior, and informed consent of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs is given," unquote. And so this is an opportunity in the amendment before the House for all members, particularly members of the New Democrat caucus, to support the clear, democratically expressed wishes of the Wet'suwet'en people as articulated by their 5 elected band councils and all 20 of the First Nations of Northern British Columbia, through whose traditional territories the Coastal GasLink project will pass. Mr. Speaker, let me just start with this. This is about respect for the moral imperative of reconciliation. And reconciliation is meaningless, Mr. Speaker. Reconciliation with Indigenous people on these lands is meaningless and, in fact, counterproductive if all it means is giving a veto and an exclusive voice to the small and growing minority who are opposed to the exercise of the economic rights of Indigenous people. Indigenous people, Mr. Speaker, were the first to establish communities on these lands, communities that were entrepreneurial, people who worked hard in their own way in those early days to develop resources, to trade between nations and tribes and communities, to ply the rivers of northern Canada as the first merchants, as the first entrepreneurs. Mr. Speaker, these are people who understood that to maintain communities in an inhospitable, cold northern land required a lot of hard work. It required innovation. It required commerce. And these are communities that understand that their culture and the preservation of their language is inextricably connected to their ability to sustain themselves independently and proudly. I don't believe there's an Indigenous person in Canada, Mr. Speaker, who seeks to be dependent on any organ of the Canadian state. When we talk about self-government, ultimately that is a dream of self-reliance, of the dignity of hard work and independence and freedom that comes from that hard work, Mr. Speaker. Now, having said that, we acknowledge that there has been a tragic history of injustice over the centuries since European contact that has caused so much dislocation and trauma and misfortune for Indigenous people. We acknowledge that, most notably incarnated in the terrible wickedness of the Indian residential school system, which constituted a massive rupture between tens of thousands of First Nations children and their languages and culture, the intergenerational consequences of which we continue to see to this day. It's also true, Mr. Speaker, that many First Nations have their traditional territories are in areas which have historically been economically deprived or had limited economic opportunities. Many smaller communities, especially throughout much of the north of Canada, have not had the benefit of proximity to a lot of urban or modern infrastructure or proximity to resources. And so many of those communities, by a function of geography, have had limited opportunities for economic independence. But thanks to the development of natural resources through much of northern Canada, we see a new day dawning, a day of opportunity, a day of hope, to quote Her Honor, the Honourable Lieutenant Governor, a day of hope that they may be able to lift their nations up and achieve that dream of real self-government, of independence, of self-reliance, of self-determination that comes with the exercise of economic rights. This is one of the most exciting, for all of the tragedy that we acknowledge inflicted on the history of Indigenous people in these lands, Mr. Speaker. We must also, as these magnificent paintings remind us, look towards the sunrise and what lies ahead, Mr. Speaker. What lies ahead is the possibility of great opportunity for First Nations communities across North America. We have seen that ourselves in the Wood Buffalo region, in the northeast corner of Alberta, where the ancestors of today's First Nations, they sealed their canoes with bitumen to ply the Athabasca River, the great rivers of northern Canada. They made economic use of that natural resource from the very point that they established communities. When modern technology was applied, thanks in part to the visionary leadership of then Premier Peter Lougheed and his government in the 1970s, when modern technology was applied to develop that natural resource at a huge industrial scale into the third largest reserve of proven and probable crude oil on the face of the earth, a resource with a current market value of more than $17 trillion. When that movement began in the 1970s, Indigenous people in Alberta began to participate in one of the great social and economic advancements in Canadian history, the development of the Canadian oil sands. And First Nations communities, the Fort Mackay First Nation, which, as I understand it, is an interesting mix of people of both Cree and Athabasca origin, the Chippewa Cree, all of the nations in that part of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, their young people began to benefit from training that was sponsored by the oil sands companies. Many of them went on to become skilled tradespeople, proudly with their Red Seal certification. They went to work on those big projects. And many of those, the first generation to participate in the 1970s and 80s, then started their own little contracting companies that grew into larger contracting companies. And then they went in turn, Mr. Speaker, and they expanded that cycle, that virtuous cycle of prosperity, to hire more and more of their fellow Indigenous people who had lived in unemployment and too often in the despair of poverty. An amazing story that we never hear about from people on the left who want to shut all of it down. An amazing story about human potential being realized, about people who otherwise would have been facing economic despair and the social despair that goes with it. Earlier today, the Honourable the Minister of Indigenous Relations was briefing a cabinet committee, Mr. Speaker, on some of the profound social challenges that our Indigenous people in this province continue to face. But while we must all redouble our efforts to work with First Nations to tackle those issues, we acknowledge the best way out of issues like addiction, of the trap of poverty. The best way out is not a government check, it's not a handout, it is the dignity of a job. And that is what the Canadian resource industry is providing to First Nations people. Mr. Speaker, do you know that, Mr. Speaker, overall, Indigenous people in Canada make up 3.3% of the labour force, but they make up 7.4% of the oil and gas workforce. The rate of employment for Indigenous people in the oil and gas industry is more than twice the rate of employment for Indigenous people broadly in the Canadian economy. On average, Indigenous Canadians generate, according to StatsCan, an income of just over $47,000 if they're in the workforce. But Indigenous people working in natural gas and oil extraction report average incomes of $144,000. Those working in pipeline transportation, incomes of $143,000. And so, Mr. Speaker, that is to say that Indigenous people working on building pipelines like Coastal GasLink are on average generating incomes 3 times higher than the average job they might have, that Indigenous people might have in Canada. And this is the power of taking Northern First Nations, where these amazing resources lie below the lands that their ancestors first inhabited, and partnering with them as partners in prosperity to develop those resources in a responsible way. I think of great leaders like former Fort McKay Chief Jim Boucher, who saw this way back in the 1980s and worked with his nation to embrace the opportunity to make deals, dare I say, trigger warning to the NDP, to make deals with the terrible big oil sands companies that the NDP and the left exist to vilify. But those companies showed great leadership and a progressive spirit at partnering. Not perfectly, there have been points of tension and disagreement, missed opportunities, as the industry and Indigenous communities have worked their way through these issues over the past 40 years. There has been, we must admit, there have been environmental issues and concerns, and we acknowledge the special historical responsibility of Indigenous people as custodians of the land and the waters and the forests and the wildlife, which their ancestors have had a special connection to. And we appreciate the knowledge and advice of Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers in ensuring that resource development happens in an environmentally sustainable way. All of those things are true, but it's equally true that Fort McKay First Nation, to take one example, went from 90% unemployment to 90% employment as a magnificent example of a marriage between the aspirations for economic independence of Indigenous people and the vision of our resource companies. And I'd like to think that the government has played a facilitative role, is increasingly doing so, for example, through the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, under the Honourable Minister's capable leadership. But, Mr. Speaker, here's the point. You take away the oil and the gas, you block all the pipelines, You adopt policies like the one I just read from the NDP. You take the negative, anti-development, anti-oil and gas, anti-economic growth ideology of the left. You impose that on the great natural resource industries, the mines, the lumber, the oil and gas, the pipelines of northern Canada, and what do? You drive tens of thousands of Indigenous people back into poverty, just when a new era of prosperity is beckoning. And that era of prosperity is represented more than anything by the potential of liquefied natural gas exports. Canada, third largest oil reserves proven and probable in the world, right here in Alberta, belonging to the people of Alberta. But we have the fifth largest proven and probable natural gas reserves. And the world is striving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and rightly so. I believe, Mr. Speaker, we have the ace card, the ace of spades to play in the global rush to reduce emissions. And you know what it is? It is the ability to produce and export our natural gas to global markets. Because as we speak, China, People's Republic of China, the largest emitter in the world, there is one Chinese state-owned enterprise, PetroChina, that produces more CO2 and GHG emissions than the entire Canadian economy. Mr. Speaker, every month China is building more thermal coal electricity production plants. Every month they are increasing month after month and day after day their emissions, driven in significant measure by coal-fired power. Every incremental unit of clean Alberta and BC, clean Canadian liquefied natural gas that we can get to Asian markets in places like China and India is a proportionate unit of converting electricity production from thermal coal to natural gas, whose emission profile is about 1/2 of thermal coal. If we could, by in some mental exercise, convert all of the thermal coal power production in Asia tomorrow to natural gas, global emission, we would no longer be talking about the challenge of global emission, the urgency. We would see a massive global step down in GHG emissions overnight. So this is a part of the climate imperative. Why doesn't the NDP understand that? Why are they opposed to Coastal GasLink? Why are they standing in the way of LNG projects? Why are they ignoring the wishes of First Nations to benefit from those job-creating projects, Mr. Speaker? Why? Why did they send MLAs out in front of this legislature 18 months ago to join a ragtag group of extremists from Extinction Rebellion, Mr. Speaker, groups that have explicitly endorsed the use of violent tactics through eco-terrorism? Why did they have MLAs out there where thousands of people were chanting, no oil, no gas, and no pipelines? Why, Mr. Speaker, would they, in a province 25% of whose economy, 30% of whose jobs are connected to this industry, would they take that position? Now, with respect to Coastal GasLink, on LNG, Mr. Speaker, Coastal GasLink is a pipeline being constructed by a great Alberta company, TransCanada and TC Energy, to take gas produced primarily now in northeastern British Columbia and ship it about 600 kilometers down towards Kitimat in the Haisla First Nation territory, passing through, as I say, about 20 traditional territories of about 20 First Nations. And the terminus would be the LNG Canada project that is being built concurrently. Now, LNG Canada is a consortium led by Shell. It's with the participation of, I think, half a dozen other major companies, and it alone represents a $36 billion capital investment which is the largest private sector investment in the history of the Canadian economy. On top of that, CGL, Coastal GasLink, is about a $6.4 billion project. So together, between the pipeline and the export facility, we're talking $42 billion of investment. $42 billion. And that does not even begin to account for the upstream exploration and production value and jobs that will be created. Now, some may say, well, this is all about BC. Where does Alberta come into this? Well, Mr. Speaker, gas markets, of course, are fungible. And most of the producers that will be developing that gas in the Duvernay, Montney, up there in the Peace Country of British Columbia, they operate on both sides of the border. And every extra BCF of natural gas we can ship off the coast, doesn't matter which side of the Alberta-BC border it comes from, the higher the price will be, the greater the demand there will be, and the more market space it opens up for the gas produced on the eastern side of the interprovincial border. So this is, we're in it together, Mr. Speaker. It's a fungible, totally integrated, connected market. But here's another key point. LNG Canada, I mean, this project, the $36 billion plus CGL, $6 billion, that represents the first train, the first major export unit. Mr. Speaker, many believe, and I was just speaking to the folks at TC Energy, that once that project is commissioned, that the proponents will be able to move that up to 3, maybe 4 trains, quadrupling the volume of LNG shipments. That would be worth billions of dollars a year for the Canadian economy, and would begin to draw off gas produced on the Alberta side, good for royalties, good, which in turn is good for schools and hospitals, gives the finance minister more money to spend. Pay down that deficit, First of all, let's do that. And you know, all of this, by the way, all those hard-working hoteliers and restaurant owners and equipment operators and small business people, be it in communities like Grand Prairie or Beaver Lodge, or communities, yes, like Fort St. John. Mr. Speaker, all of those hardworking small business people will benefit from the upstream work as well. What a great story, because in the drive to include First Nations in this great renaissance of resource development, there are incredible contracting opportunities. I mean, billions of dollars of benefits that will flow to First Nations. So is it any wonder, Mr. Speaker, that, and I have to close off one point on LNG economics. If we can get LNG Canada done, Coastal GasLink, if the NDP fails in their effort to block and kill Coastal GasLink, and if common sense and the democratic wishes of First Nations prevails over the environmental extremism of the Canadian political left. Mr. Speaker, if that happens, we get that thing built, I can assure you that Alberta natural gas producers will come together to risk capital to build a second pipeline. In fact, there is a project. It's the, how to pronounce the Rockies. The Rockies project. That is still conceptual, Mr. Speaker. It's a potential consortium of over a dozen Alberta natural gas producers. And we are in ongoing discussions with that group. They're fairly advanced in their planning. And their dream, Mr. Speaker, is to build a pipeline and then consequently a liquefied natural gas terminal off the coast of the Nisga'a First Nation, which was the first nation in British Columbia to get a self-government agreement with Ottawa. And the Nisga'a, by the way, Mr. Speaker, they have also been great advocates of a West Coast oil pipeline. They were outraged when Ottawa, without consultation, violated the honor of the Crown to consult First Nations through its unilateral imposition of the tanker ban Bill C-48, because that's denied the Nisga'a Nation. This is stuff you'll never hear from the NDP, because they don't care about Aboriginal economic rights. You'll never hear it from their fellow travelers in the media, the Laurentian elites, people, rich white people in downtown Toronto. You know, their kids going out to block GO trains. because they saw some kind of a CBC story about First Nations being opposed to this, Mr. Speaker? What gross distortion of the truth we are hearing from our opinion elites in this country, and so many in the political elites. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, completely, explicitly, totally opposed, not just to oil pipelines, but to clean natural gas pipelines. They persuaded the propaganda campaign from the Green Left has persuaded many urban Canadians, and some, I suppose, in Indigenous communities, to believe that Coastal GasLink is going to be carrying bitumen or dilbit, diluted bitumen down to the West Coast. Nothing could be further from the truth. If there is a spill, and by the way, I stand next to a former senior official at the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association, the Honourable Minister of Energy, and I think she can confirm for me that the safety record for oil and gas pipelines in North America in the past several years is like 99.8%.
99.999.
99.999%. I stand corrected, Mr. Speaker. And so the chances of a spill or a disruption are statistically basically zero, virtually zero. And yet, Mr. Speaker, if there is a rupture on a natural gas pipeline, this is a product that doesn't stay in the environment. It doesn't pose a risk to the safety of the water table. That there's no significant environmental risk, which was affirmed by the National Energy Board's approval of CGL following years of exhaustive study. Now, I find it passing strange, Mr. Speaker, that the NDP over there in British Columbia and their government, Premier Horgan and his team, are strongly in favor of Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada, strongly in favor of more liquefied natural gas projects. But over here, their loony left cousins in the NDP are against it, Mr. Speaker. You know, I never thought I'd see a day when the BC NDP would sound like the mainstream pro-jobs, old-school New Democrats of yore, while these folks over here had sold out to the radical green left. It's why they were out there with Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion, Mr. Speaker. It's why they were silent in the face of David Suzuki's exhortation to potential violence, Mr. Speaker. And so this is an opportunity for us, as I say, to speak in solidarity with the 21st Nations in Northern BC, whose elected councils have not just endorsed the agreement, many of them did so after having plebiscites and having done traditional lodge meetings within their clans. They did exhaustive multi-year consultations. And that is what led the elected leaders to support this project. Let me quote, for example, one of those leaders who said that, here we are. This is Helen Mitchell, hereditary chief of the Skin Tyee Nation on the Wet'suwet'en territory. She says, I support the resources because, like I said, we had lots of consultation. We asked lots of questions. We walked to the very ground where the LNG project was going to go. We've had lots of consultation in the last 5 years or so. We all discussed it. Elders, our band, all our band members, we all agreed. We all agreed, and I have hereditary chiefs too, and they've all agreed to support Coastal GasLink. All 20 of these elected nations. And by the way, let me quote Teresa Tate Day, another Wet'suwet'en hereditary chief who's been pushed out of the way by the Green Left's preferred spokespeople up there. Here's what Teresa said. As female Wet'suwet'en members and community leaders, we want to be heard and involved in the decision-making. That is our way. But our voices are not being heard. We have been working particularly with LNG and Coastal GasLink. Our people want a benefit, and they want to be able to make a decision on a positive note. However, we've experienced lateral violence and coercion since then by the 5 chiefs who claim to represent the nation. Let me quote Chief Dan George of the Burns Lake Silcatquo Nation at Wet'suwet'en, quotes, I had our community vote on Coastal GasLink, and 80% voted in favor of the gas line. So that gave me my marching orders to do what I needed to do to negotiate the best deal I can for my people on the reserve. There's few economic opportunities in northern BC. There's a huge mountain pine beetle that has devastated all of the pine in northern BC, and most of us First Nations have been loggers at one time or another throughout our lives, and there's not very much logging left, the chief said. There are very few opportunities now, and Coastal GasLink is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, unquote. That's one of the Wet'suwet'en chiefs. I've got pages of these. But, Mr. Speaker, when it came for the NDP to speak on this motion, they referred to the Wet'suwet'en hereditary. They want the prior and informed consent of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. Now, let's be clear. We're talking about 5 out of dozens of hereditary chiefs who are outspokenly opposed to this. I understand 2 of them don't even actually have an historical connection to the Wet'suwet'en people. But, Mr. Speaker, and in fact, hereditary Wet'suwet'en female chiefs were pushed out of the band office. Where are the feminists in the NDP speaking up in their defense? What about all of the elected female Wet'suwet'en chiefs who have received threats of violence for standing behind their people's economic aspirations? When we have hereditary chief Teresa Tate Day say that she has experienced lateral violence and coercion because of her support for the project, why isn't the NDP passing motions of resolution, of solidarity, resolutions of solidarity for Teresa Tate Day, who has faced threats of violence for standing behind the democratically elected wishes of her people? This is upside down, Mr. Speaker, this motion that the NDP passed. And you know what it is. It's just classic. The left just can't help themselves, Mr. Speaker. They love virtue signaling. And so many in the media have decided that this is a white hat, black hat story, and that the 80% of the Wet'suwet'en who have voted for Coastal GasLink, their opinion doesn't count. And the only folks we will listen to are those being supported by foreign-funded special interests trying to landlock not just our oil sands, but also our natural gas. The only environmental consequence of that would be to prolong Asia's dependence on thermal coal-fired power with higher emissions. It makes no sense for social justice. It makes no sense for racial reconciliation. It makes no sense for climate change and emissions reductions. It makes no sense for the Alberta economy or working women and men in this province. Why then did the NDP take that position? And they refer outrageously, Mr. Speaker, provocatively, in the motion that they passed, they denounce violence enacted against members of Wet'suwet'en First Nation and land defenders. Land defenders. I see that phrase thrown around by the CBC. Land defenders basically means upper middle class Caucasians from places like Vancouver and Seattle who go up there with probably very industrial quantities of pot and hang out pretending that they are somehow warriors for racial justice, while what they're literally doing is standing in the way of economic aspirations of the local people, of the contractors from the Wet'suwet'en Nation who want to work on the project. Mr. Speaker, and the NDP refers to violence enacted by the RCMP. Violence enacted. This is so rich with irony. The temerity of this government to consider creating a made-in-Alberta provincial police force that young Albertans could aspire to grow up and serve their communities in, with First Nations, for the first time in Canadian history, Indigenous governance oversight on a provincial police service, with integrated social services, addressing addictions and those complex social issues. We are proposing that as a possible improvement to policing, to strengthen Alberta. And what does the NDP do up? They rise up in defense, they say, of the RCMP, because the RCMP union told them to. But, Mr. Speaker, the moment the RCMP actually does its job and enforces peacefully, non-violently, a court order, what does the NDP do? They turn on those RCMP constables. dealing with a very difficult situation who simply enforced the order of a court. Mr. Speaker, this is the NDP in this motion criticizing the police for maintaining the rule of law and doing what they have no option in doing, but which is to enforce a court order. How could they even aspire to be a government? Are they telling us that if we had similar blockades here in Alberta, and they were back, God forbid, on the side of government, that they would tell the police not to enforce court orders, that the peaceful enforcement of those orders constitutes violence? Do they, Mr. Speaker, the Alberta NDP has to pick a lane. Do they aspire to be a responsible mainstream government focused on economic growth and the rule of law, or are they just a loud and cranky megaphone for the loony left? They have to, we know which lane they picked on Coastal GasLink. It's the latter, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to, in summary, I have pages and pages of endorsements for this project from grassroots, elected and hereditary leaders of the Wet'suwet'en people. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, 64 First Nations in Alberta, we have 48 Alberta First Nations, 46 of whom, 46 of the 48 have been clearly supportive of oil extraction and development, including pipeline construction. 40 BC First Nations have been volubly in favor of natural gas development, with none opposed. So, Mr. Speaker, now is the time to put meaning behind the rhetoric of reconciliation. There is no reconciliation for people who live perennially in poverty. There is no opportunity to mitigate the injustices of the past as long as governments, political activists, tell First Nations that they do not have a right to participate in the development of the resources that first belonged to their ancestors. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Assembly to adopt this motion to express our solidarity with brave First Nations and Indigenous people in Canada who are seeking to move themselves forward in the path of dignity, of self-reliance, of respect, and of prosperity.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, honourable members. Are there any members wishing to join debate? I see the honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adjourn debate.
Having heard the motion as proposed by the honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Carried. I see the honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat has risen again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a long week, and I know we are looking forward to being back here next week, but I move to adjourn the House until 1:30 p.m. on Monday, December 6th.
Thank you, honourable member. Those members in favour of the motion to adjourn as proposed by the honourable member for Brooks Medicine Hat, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried. We are adjourned until Monday at 1:30 p.m.